I will never forget the sound of that knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks echoed through my apartment at exactly 8:15 on a rainy Tuesday morning. At first, I assumed it was another delivery driver. I had spent the previous week sorting through boxes of legal documents left behind after my grandmother's funeral. My apartment looked more like a law office than a home. When I opened the door, however, my entire world stopped. 2 court officers stood in the hallway. Both wore dark blue jackets with official identification clipped to their pockets. Behind them stood my younger brother, Daniel. He wasn't crying. He wasn't worried. He was smiling. And standing beside him was my mother. She folded her arms across her chest as if she were watching the final scene of a movie she had waited years to see. One of the officers cleared his throat. "Emma Carter." "Yes, have a court order requiring you to accompany us." I frowned. There must be some mistake. Older officer handed me several pages. There has been no mistake. As I looked down, my heartbeat became painfully loud. Petition for emergency guardianship, the words blurred before my eyes, according to the documents. I had supposedly become mentally unstable after my grandmother's death. The petition claimed I was suffering paranoid delusions, that I could no longer manage my finances, that I posed a danger to myself, and most importantly, that someone else should immediately take control of every dollar I owned. That someone else was my brother Daniel. I slowly lifted my head. "What is this?" Daniel shrugged dramatically. "We're trying to help you." Mother nodded sadly. "You haven't been yourself." I laughed, not because anything was funny, because it was so unbelievably cruel that my brain refused to believe it. "Done nothing wrong," Mother sighed. "That's exactly what someone in denial would say." Officer spoke gently. "Miss Carter, you're not under arrest, but we are required to escort you for an emergency psychological evaluation." I stared at my own family. Neither of them looked away. Neither of them hesitated. At that moment, I realized this wasn't impulsive. This had been planned, every word, every document, every fake expression of concern, months of preparation. And I had never seen it coming 3 months earlier. My grandmother Alina had passed away peacefully at 83. Unlike the rest of our family, she never cared about expensive cars or luxury vacations. She believed wealth should create opportunities, not entitlement. After my grandfather died years earlier, she built one of the largest privately owned publishing companies in our state. Millions of dollars, several office buildings, hundreds of employees. But what mattered most wasn't the money, it was her integrity. When doctors diagnosed her with heart failure, our relatives suddenly became very interested in visiting. Before that, many of them hadn't called her in years. Now they arrived carrying flowers, expensive chocolates, fake smiles. They fought over who got to push her wheelchair, who sat closest during family dinners, who looked the saddest whenever visitors arrived. Grandmother noticed everything. She rarely commented, but she noticed. I visited every day, not because I expected anything. Because she was my grandmother, I drove her to appointments, cooked meals, read novels aloud whenever her eyesight became too weak. Sometimes we'd simply sit quietly on the porch watching birds. One afternoon, she smiled. "You never ask about my will," I laughed, "because I don't care." "I know, honestly." I squeezed her hand. "I'd rather have 1 more year with you than every dollar you own." Tears filled her eyes. She never answered. Instead, she changed the subject, looking back. I think she'd already made her decision. The reading of the will happened 2 weeks after her funeral. Our attorney gathered everyone inside the conference room. Daniel arrived wearing a $5,000 suit. Mother wore black designer clothing despite complaining for years that money was tight. Several distant relatives attended as well. Everyone expected an equal inheritance. Instead, the attorney calmly announced, "My client has left approximately 90% of her estate to her granddaughter, Emma Carter." Silence, absolute silence. Daniel blinked. Mother's face became pale then. Chaos erupted. "This is impossible. You manipulated her. You isolated her." Daniel slammed his fist onto the conference table. "She would never do this willingly." Attorney calmly produced medical evaluations proving grandmother had been mentally competent when signing every document. Witnesses confirmed it. Doctors confirmed it. Video recordings confirmed it. Legally, there was nothing they could do, or so I believed. Because I underestimated just how far greed can push ordinary people over the next several weeks. Everything changed. Family members stopped answering my calls. Friends suddenly became distant. Rumors spread online claiming I had manipulated an elderly woman. Someone anonymously emailed several local news stations. False stories began circulating. Then my employer received complaints, then business partners, then neighbors. Someone wanted everyone to believe I was dangerous. I suspected Daniel, but I couldn't prove it. One evening, my best friend Olivia visited. She looked nervous. "Emma, what? I think someone's following you." I froze. "Seen the same black SUV outside your apartment 3 different days." I tried convincing myself it was coincidence. Deep down, I knew it wasn't. The campaign against me had already begun, and I had no idea just how much worse it was about to become. The emergency psychological evaluation lasted nearly 4 hours. Every question felt designed to make me doubt myself. Have you been sleeping? Do you believe your family is trying to harm you? Have you experienced unusual stress since your grandmother's death? I answered calmly, refusing to let frustration get the better of me. Finally, the psychiatrist closed my file. MS. Carter, based on today's examination, I see no evidence that you're mentally incompetent. Relief washed over me, but it lasted only a moment. Court hearing is still scheduled for next week, he continued. You'll need to present evidence there. This evaluation alone may not be enough. As I left the building, Olivia was waiting outside. She hugged me tightly. I knew you'd be okay. I wish this were over, I whispered. Olivia hesitated before speaking. Someone came to my office this morning asking questions about you. What kind of questions? They wanted to know if you'd ever lost your temper or talked to yourself. A chill ran down my spine. Daniel wasn't just attacking me in court. He was trying to destroy my reputation everywhere. The next morning, I visited my grandmother's attorney, Mr. Harrison. His expression was unusually serious. Emma, there's something your grandmother instructed me to give you, but only if anyone tried to challenge your inheritance. He unlocked a small safe hidden behind a painting. From inside, he removed a sealed envelope. Across the front, in my grandmother's handwriting, were the words, "For Emma, only if they betray you." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, it means the people I feared most have finally shown their true faces. I loved your mother once. I loved Daniel too, but I could no longer ignore their greed. For 2 years, I quietly documented everything. Mr. Harrison placed a black flash drive on the desk. This came with the letter. What is it? Evidence. We plugged it into his computer. There were hundreds of files, emails, bank records, security camera footage, voice recordings. One recording froze the room into silence. Daniel's voice. If Grandma refuses to change the will, we'll just prove she wasn't competent. Mother answered calmly. Then we'll control everything. Another recording captured them discussing fake medical reports. Another showed Daniel offering money to a nurse in exchange for signing false paperwork. They planned this months before she died, I whispered. Mr. Harrison nodded. Your grandmother suspected they would. 3 days before the hearing, another surprise arrived. A private investigator named Marcus Reed requested a meeting. I worked for your grandmother, he explained. She hired a private investigator for almost 18 months. He handed me a thick folder. Been documenting your family's activities. Inside were photographs, financial records, phone logs, copies of emails. Marcus pointed to one page. Daniel met secretly with a psychologist willing to sign a misleading statement about your mental health. What? The psychologist never actually examined you. Every page revealed another lie. By the end, my stomach felt sick. My own family hadn't acted out of grief. They had planned every step like a business operation. The courtroom was packed on the morning of the hearing. Journalists filled the back rows. Several people whispered as I entered. Daniel sat confidently beside his attorney. Mother wore a sad expression for the cameras. She even dabbed fake tears with a handkerchief. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. Daniel's attorney stood first. Honor, Ms. Emma Carter has become emotionally unstable following her grandmother's death. We respectfully request that temporary guardianship of her estate be granted to her brother. He presented medical opinions, witness statements, financial documents. Everything looked convincing until my attorney stood. Your Honor, he said calmly, the petitioner has committed one serious mistake. Judge adjusted her glasses. What mistake? They assumed my client came here unprepared. My attorney placed the flash drive onto the evidence table. We would like permission to play several recordings. Daniel suddenly stopped smiling. Mother's hands began to shake. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw fear in their eyes. The courtroom fell into complete silence. The judge leaned forward as my attorney placed the flash drive into the courtroom's evidence system. Honor, he said, Every recording, document, and video you are about to see has been authenticated and preserved according to the law. First recording began to play. Daniel's voice echoed through the courtroom. Once Emma loses control of the estate, everything becomes ours. We just have to convince the court she's unstable. Then my mother's voice followed. Nobody will question us if the doctors believe she's mentally unfit. Gasps spread through the gallery. Daniel shot to his feet. Those recordings are fake. Before the judge could respond, my attorney calmly handed over an independent forensic report. Recordings have been examined by certified experts. They have not been edited or manipulated. The judge read the report in silence before looking directly at Daniel. "Mr. Carter, sit down." The first time since this nightmare began, Daniel looked frightened. The next piece of evidence was even more damaging. Security footage from the hospital showed Daniel meeting privately with a former administrative employee just weeks before my grandmother signed her final will. Financial records presented alongside the footage showed a large payment made shortly afterward. One witness after another testified. The former employee admitted she had been pressured to help create misleading paperwork about my grandmother's condition. A handwriting expert explained that several signatures attached to the guardianship petition had been forged. Finally, the psychiatrist who had evaluated me took the stand. "In my professional opinion," he testified, "Ms. Emma Carter is fully capable of managing her personal affairs and financial responsibilities." Courtroom grew quiet again. The truth was becoming impossible to deny. After a short recess, the judge returned with her decision. She looked first at me. "Ms. Carter, this court finds no evidence that you are mentally incompetent." Relief filled my chest. "Petition for emergency guardianship is dismissed with prejudice." Then the judge turned toward Daniel and my mother. "Based on the evidence presented today, this court finds substantial evidence suggesting fraud, forgery, and abuse of legal process." She ordered the court clerk to forward the complete case file to the appropriate authorities for criminal investigation. Daniel's face turned pale. My mother began to cry, not the dramatic tears she had shown the cameras. These were tears of fear. As court officers approached, Daniel tried to argue. "This isn't fair," the judge interrupted him. "Mr. Carter, fairness is exactly why this court exists." The officers escorted them from the courtroom while reporters hurried outside to cover the story. For the first time in months, I could finally breathe. The weeks that followed were difficult but healing. News outlets corrected the false stories that had damaged my reputation. Friends who had doubted me reached out with sincere apologies. Some relationships could be repaired. Others could not. I learned that forgiveness does not always require reconciliation. Sometimes, the healthiest choice is simply to move forward. The inheritance remained exactly as my grandmother intended. But instead of focusing on the money, I focused on honoring her values. I expanded her publishing company, protecting the jobs of its employees. I established a scholarship for students who dreamed of becoming writers but could not afford college. I also created a foundation that provided free legal assistance to older adults facing financial exploitation. Hoping other families would never experience what mine had. Every project carried my grandmother's name. Her legacy became one of generosity rather than conflict. Nearly a year later, I visited her favorite park. The same bench where we had often watched the sunset remained there beneath the old oak trees. I sat quietly, remembering one of the last conversations we ever shared. She had smiled and said, "Character is revealed when people believe no one is watching." At the time, I hadn't fully understood her words. Now I did. Greed had revealed my family's character. Adversity had revealed mine. I placed a small bouquet of white lilies beside the memorial plaque dedicated to her. "Thank you," I whispered, "for the inheritance, but for believing in me." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead. For the first time since her passing, my heart felt at peace. I stood, turned toward the path ahead, and walked into a future no longer defined by betrayal, but by hope, purpose, and the lessons of a woman whose wisdom would stay with me forever. The end.